Now we come to the next sutta, is 46.51. This is a very important sutta, and half of it was in the sutta 46.2. I mentioned earlier that the 46.2 is very important, but I said I will not read it because all of it is contained in this sutta 46.51, and this 46.51 is much more than the 46.2. Okay, at Savatthi, monks, the Buddha said, I will teach you the nutriment and the de-nourishment in regard to the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment. Stop here for a moment. Nutriments means the food. Food for the 5 hindrances or the 7 factors of enlightenment. That means the conditions to nourish these 5 hindrances or the 7 factors of enlightenment. And conversely, de-nourishment means that which weakens the 5 hindrances or the 7 factors of enlightenment. And what, monks, is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sensual desire and for the increase and expansion of arisen sensual desire? There is, monks, the sign of the beautiful, sukha nimitta. Frequently giving careless attention to it is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sensual desire and for the increase and expansion of arisen sensual desire. Stop here for a moment to explain. So, when we see something, if we pay attention, then it may strike us as beautiful or attractive, especially like the opposite sex. So, if we pay attention to that sign, the sign of beauty in that body, in that being, then lust arises. Lust is sensual desire. So that is why we read earlier in the suttas on the 6 sense basis, when we are attracted by sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thoughts, that we should be very careful not to pay attention to the signs and the details. In other words, we just know and don't go and observe too closely. If you observe too closely, then either you see it as attractive or repulsive. If it's attractive, then sensual desire increases. If it's repulsive, after we come to see, anger arises, ill will. So from here you can understand why in the earlier suttas we said that it was said that don't pay too much attention to the signs and features. And what, monks, is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen ill will and for the increase and expansion of arisen ill will? There is, monks, the sign of the repulsive, patigga nimitta. Frequently giving careless attention to it is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen ill will and for the increase and expansion of arisen ill will. So this one, stop here to explain. Sign of the repulsive, something that is repulsive, something that is obnoxious, that you don't like. So if you are not careful, when that feeling arises or that perception arises, you are not careful about it, then the ill will arises. I'll give an example. A lot of young people are very vain about their beauty or their handsomeness and all that. So when they see somebody old, with wrinkled skin and almost few teeth left, white hair or not much hair left, and crooked, hunchback and all that, skin blotchy and all that, then when they see, they feel repulsiveness. They don't like, they look down on that old man or the old lady. But they forget one day they're going to be exactly like that old man or the old lady. So this is what is meant by careless attention. That's why it's very important to look at our mind all the time. The states that come up in our mind, desire or ill will, repulsion and all this. So only when we keep observing our mind that we can know whether we have wholesome states or unwholesome states, and then only we can change our character. Otherwise we can never change. So that's the sign of the repulsive. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sloth and torpor, and for the increase and expansion of arisen sloth and torpor. There are monks, discontent, lethargy, lazy stretching, drowsiness after meals, sluggishness of mind. Frequently giving careless attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sloth and torpor, and for the increase and expansion of arisen sloth and torpor. Let's stop here for a while. This sloth and torpor consists of two things. One is sloth. Sloth is like lethargy, like no desire to do anything, laziness. And torpor is what we call blur. The mind is blur. Cannot see clearly, cannot understand clearly. So it mentions drowsiness after meals. If we take a heavy meal, it's very natural. After heavy meal, all the blood goes to your stomach. You feel sleepy. When you feel lazy and sleepy, actually it's trying to hypnotize you. This laziness and sleepiness is trying to hypnotize you. And most of us, we are hypnotized by the laziness and sleepiness. When we have that feeling, and then if we are not careful, we believe very sleepy. So you tend to want to sleep. So that is careless attention to this sloth and torpor. So sloth and torpor will increase if we are not careful. When we have this sluggishness of mind and this lethargy. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen restlessness and remorse, and for the increase and expansion of arisen restlessness and remorse. There is monks, unsettledness of mind. Frequently giving careless attention to it is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen restlessness and remorse, and for the increase and expansion of arisen restlessness and remorse. So, when this unsettledness of mind, the mind is disturbed, cannot settle down, and then if we give in to it, we believe it, so it means we are not giving careful attention to it, and then this restlessness and remorse increases. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen doubt, and for the increase and expansion of arisen doubt. There are monks, things that are the basis for doubt. Frequently giving careless attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen doubt, and for the increase and expansion of arisen doubt. Suppose you have something that gives you doubt, and you are unable to give careful attention to it, then this doubt increases. And the reason why we are unable to give careful attention to it is because our mind is not very clear. Our mind is have all these five hindrances, and we are blur most of the time. So this doubt arises when we have to make a decision. For example, you want to do something and you have a few options, A, B, C, D, and your mind is not very clear. You have a lot of doubt now. Is A better, or B better, or C better, or D better? And you cannot see clearly. The only way you can see clearly, that means have yoniso manasikara, careful attention or careful consideration, is a clear mind. That's why it's important to get rid of these five hindrances. Now, the next set, the nutriments for the enlightenment factors. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of recollection, sati, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of recollection. There are monks, things that are the basis for the enlightenment factor of recollection. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of recollection, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of recollection. Stop here a moment. No? So these things that are the basis for recollection. For example, Dhamma, the suttas that you have heard, they are the basis for recollection. So if you frequently give careful attention to the Dhamma that you have heard, to the suttas that you have read, and then this factor of recollection arises or increases. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma, Dhammavichaya. There are monks, wholesome and unwholesome states, blamable and blameless states, inferior and superior states, dark and bright states with their counterparts. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma. Stop here for a moment. This Dhamma, basically, Dhamma is teaching us to differentiate between wholesome and unwholesome states. We study all the Buddha's words. Basically, this is the message that the Buddha is trying to bring to us, to differentiate between skillful and unskillful states. You can also call them blamable and blameless states, inferior and superior states, dark and bright states. Why dark and bright? Because if you cultivate unwholesome states, evil states, they will bring you to dark places of rebirth. And if you practice skillful or wholesome states, then they bring you to bright states of rebirth. So if we frequently give careful attention to the Dhamma that is teaching us the difference between these wholesome and unwholesome states, etc., then this factor of investigation of Dhamma arises or develops. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of energy, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of energy. There are monks, the element of arousal, the element of endeavor, the element of exertion. Frequently giving attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of energy, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of energy. So we exert ourselves, arouse our energy, our endeavor. So that is called energetic effort, which is here is called energy. Is virya. Virya is having energetic effort, making the effort, exerting ourselves. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of piti, and for that is delight. Here it is rapture, but I prefer the word delight. And for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of delight. There are monks, things that are the basis for the enlightenment factor of delight. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of delight, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of delight. Stop here again. So here, earlier we read in the suttas, this piti, there are two types of piti. One is carnal piti, the other one is spiritual piti, spiritual delight. Carnal delight refers to the delight that arises from the five chords of sensual desire, worldly enjoyment. When you enjoy worldly things, and the delight arises, that is carnal delight. But that has nothing to do with the seven factors of enlightenment. What is meant here is the spiritual delight. And spiritual delight, we read it earlier in the suttas, refers to the first and second jhana. You remember we read about I think it's 1284, was it? Page 12. Let me check again. 1283, 1284. So here explains that the spiritual delight refers to the first jhana and the second jhana. So we want to pay attention to the things that are the basis for the first jhana and the second jhana to arise. So depending on what is your meditation object, if your meditation object is the breath, so that is the basis for the enlightenment factor of delight. So if you frequently give careful attention to your meditation object, that is the nutriment for the first and second jhana to arise, and hence the enlightenment factor of piti arises with the first and second jhana. That is what is meant here. The things that are the basis for the factor of delight is basically your meditation object. And what monks is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of tranquility, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of tranquility. There are monks, tranquility of body, tranquility of mind. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of tranquility, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of tranquility. We'll stop here for a moment. So here we have tranquility of body and tranquility of mind. So if you want to develop this enlightenment factor of tranquility, you always have to try to maintain tranquility of body and tranquility of mind. So whatever it is that disturbs your body or disturbs your mind, don't entertain it. For example, if you are too busy, a very good example is like doing business. Doing business, you have a lot of stress. You have a lot of times when you cannot become tranquil. If you are tranquil, your business cannot succeed. You cannot go. So you have to give up all these things if you want tranquility of mind. Tranquility of body is also not to allow your body to become too active. Either too much exertion, physical exertion and all that doesn't give you tranquility of body. So you want tranquility of mind. Don't go out to the world so much. To go inwards. And what monks is a nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of concentration, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of concentration. There are monks, the sign of serenity, the sign of non-dispersal. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of concentration, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of concentration. That means whatever gives you serenity, whatever gives you non-dispersal of mind, you pay attention to it, and that will maintain your concentration. A simple example is, for example, if we sit down in meditation, we can achieve deep states of meditation. But most of the time, or at least for most people, a lot of our time we cannot be sitting in meditation, right? We have to be walking around, doing this, doing that. In that case, if you want to maintain your concentration, a simple way is to do your chanting. You do some chanting, what the Hindus call japa. Maybe that became jampi in Malay. So this you keep chanting, whatever chant suits you. You can chant Arahang, Arahang, or Buddho, Buddho, or Itipiso, Bhagawa, a longer chant if you want. So whatever chant gives you serenity of mind, gives you non-dispersal of mind. So you do that. Or another one is, for example, if you pay attention to your breath, then it gives you serenity, gives you non-dispersal of mind. Then if you can do that, you do that. And what monks is a nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of equanimity, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of equanimity. There are monks, things that are the basis for the enlightenment factor of equanimity. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen enlightenment factor of equanimity, and for the fulfillment by development of the arisen enlightenment factor of equanimity. So this one, you have to be very observant. What are the things that give you equanimity? So you try to maintain it. For example, if you have already a good state of meditation, then your mind becomes very blissful. And then sometimes somebody says some nasty thing to you. Normally, you would get angry. But if you already have a good state of mind, a peaceful state of mind, even though there is reason to get angry, you don't want to get angry. Because you know, if you get angry, it upsets your mind, upsets your whole system. So you just laugh it off, you don't get angry. So other conditions are like, what are the things that make you agitated. You don't go and get involved with it. For example, if you go to a place where there's a lot of people, and then you cannot maintain an equanimous mind. So you try to go to be aloof from society, and then only the mind is equanimous. So all these factors you have to observe for yourself. What are the things that suit your practice? Now we come to the third part. And what monks is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sensual desire from arising, and arisen sensual desire from increasing and expanding. There is monks the sign of foulness or unattractiveness. Frequently giving careful attention to it is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sensual desire from arising, and arisen sensual desire from increasing and expanding. This one, the sign of foulness or unattractiveness, if you refer to sensual desire, there is a practice taught by the Buddha called the 32 parts of the body, where we recite the head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone, marrow, kidney, heart, liver, midriff, spleen, lung, bowel, entrail, gorge, dung, brain, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tear, grease, spittle, snot, all of the joint urine. So these 32 parts, if we can either recite them slowly or we recite them fast. If we recite them fast, it is a concentration exercise. It's a concentration exercise that maintains our concentration. If we recite it slowly, then we can consider one by one head hair. Then we consider it for a moment, then body hair, and then we consider it for a moment. So if we frequently do this, then we can see these 32 parts of the body quite clearly, so that when we look at a body, we don't only look at its skin deep. Mostly we look at somebody, we only look at its skin deep, at that person's skin deep. As they say, beauty is only skin deep. Below that skin, there's a lot of unattractive body parts, urine, excrement, blood, pus, all that. So if we practice these 32 parts of the body, then we can see the unattractiveness of the body, and that will weaken sensual desire, prevent it from increasing. And what monks is the denourishment that prevents unarisen ill will from arising, and arisen ill will from increasing and expanding. There is, monks, the liberation by mind of loving kindness, metta. Frequently giving careful attention to it is the denourishment that prevents unarisen ill will from arising, and arisen ill will from increasing and expanding. This one, liberation by mind of loving kindness, that means we, or you can say release by mind of loving kindness, or radiation by mind of loving kindness. In the suttas, the Buddha says, if you really want to practice this radiation of loving kindness, you have to attain strong samadhi. When you have strong samadhi, then it's like a kind of psychic power you radiate. loving kindness out, and other beings can feel it, other beings can know. But for most people, you don't have that strong samadhi to do this. Then we give loving kindness to others through our body language, through our verbal language, and if possible through our mental thoughts also. So through the three karmas, if you always think in that way, that you want to be to have loving kindness to all beings, because all beings are basically like us. We have a lot of unhappiness. Other beings also have a lot of unhappiness. Probably other beings have much more unhappiness than you have. So you give them loving kindness instead of anger. So if we always have this in our mind, then even though you don't have the psychic power to radiate out to people, but people can sense it through your body language and your verbal language especially, and sometimes through your mental karma also. So if you frequently think of loving kindness, that will prevent ill will or anger from arising. And what monks is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sloth and torpor from arising, and arisen sloth and torpor from increasing and expanding. There are monks, the element of arousal, the element of endeavor, the element of exertion. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the denourishment that prevents unarisen sloth and torpor from arising, and arisen sloth and torpor from increasing and expanding. For most of us, sloth and torpor is one of the big obstacles to meditation, especially like in the morning when you want to meditate, very sleepy. So here the Buddha says, you want to weaken your sloth and torpor, put forth energy. Good way, if you sit, it's very difficult. You become like hypnotized by the sloth and torpor, cannot fight it. So a good way is to do walking meditation. You walk. The more sleepy you are, the faster you should walk. So when you walk faster, then all your blood starts moving. Then you're not so sleepy. One of the reasons we feel sleepy is that the blood in our brain is stale. We need to change it. That's why you notice one of the yoga practices, they go upside down. Yes or not? Go upside down. So all the blood goes to the brain, change the stale blood in your brain. But don't do too long, you get a headache. Try not to do more than 1 minute. If you can't go vertically upside down, you can still go to the wall, edge yourselves to the wall, and put your leg as high as you can. If you even do it for 1 minute, you'll change the blood in your head. You don't feel so sleepy. Even if you don't go to that extent, even if you just lie down horizontally on the floor, you just lie for 1 or 2 minutes, then the blood flows better. Then after that, you get up, you don't feel so sleepy. So this element of exertion will decrease your sloth and torpor, put forth energy. So always remember, when this sloth and torpor comes, you always consider it's like the magician ghost trying to hypnotize you. So you have to fight. And what monks is the denourishment that prevents unarisen restlessness and remorse from arising, and arisen restlessness and remorse from increasing and expanding. There is monks, peacefulness of mind. Frequently giving careful attention to it is the denourishment that prevents unarisen restlessness and remorse from arising, and arisen restlessness and remorse from increasing and expanding. So this restlessness, it arises, we try to make the mind peaceful. How to make the mind peaceful? Think of things think of thoughts that will give you peace of mind. I can think of the Buddha, the Arahants, think of whatever it is that gives you happiness, gives you peace of mind. Don't think of your problems. You think of your problems, you become more restless. That's why there are some people actually, they should not meditate. Many years ago I heard about one girl, he went to one meditation center, and practice meditation. She had some problem with the boyfriend. I think they broke off or something, and she was heartbroken. So she thought, go and meditate, it's good for her. But the problem is when you have such a problem, when you sit down, you think of nothing except that problem. You cannot go away, but it's a very strong problem. So, as a result of staying in that meditation center a few days, she committed suicide. So, you have to be very careful. When you have that type of traumatic experience, you cannot meditate. So, to bring your mind to a more peaceful state, you think of things that make you happy, think of things that make you calm down. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents unarisen doubt from arising and arisen doubt from increasing and expanding. There are monks, wholesome and unwholesome states, blamable and blameless states, inferior and superior states, dark and bright states with their counterparts. Frequently giving careful attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents unarisen doubt from arising and arisen doubt from increasing. Now this doubt here in the 7 factors of enlightenment, I think it refers to doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. There is not doubt about worldly affairs, about worldly things. So when we think about wholesome and unwholesome states, blamable and blameless states, inferior and superior states, etc., basically we are thinking of the Dhamma. So when we think of the Dhamma and pay careful attention to the Dhamma that you have learned, then slowly your doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha will decrease or become eliminated. Now we come to the 4th part, the de-nourishment or the weakening of the enlightenment factors. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of recollection from arising and the arisen enlightenment factor of recollection from reaching fulfillment by development. There are monks, things that are the basis for the enlightenment factor of recollection. Not frequently giving attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of recollection from arising and the arisen enlightenment factor of recollection from reaching fulfillment by development. So this one, things that are the basis for recollection is like the suttas, the Dhamma that we have heard. If we recollect the Dhamma that we have heard, that is practicing recollection, the enlightenment factor of recollection. So we don't frequently give attention to the Dhamma that we have learned, then that is the weakening of the recollection factor. So we don't want this factor to decrease, to weaken, then we have to frequently recall the Dhamma, remember the Dhamma that we have learned. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma from arising and the arisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma from reaching fulfillment by development. There are monks, wholesome and unwholesome states, blamable and blameless states, inferior and superior states, dark and bright states with their counterparts. Not frequently giving attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma from arising and the arisen enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma from reaching fulfillment by development. In other words, if we do not constantly investigate the Dhamma, the words of the Buddha, then there is the weakening of this factor, investigation of Dhamma. So if you don't want this factor of investigation of Dhamma to weaken, then we have to constantly investigate the Dhamma that we have learned, study the suttas. When we study the suttas, we have to go through them like with a comb. If you have your own book, it's the best. Then you start underlying, making notes and all that. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of energy from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of energy from reaching fulfillment by development. There are monks, the element of arousal, the element of endeavor, the element of exertion. Not frequently giving attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of energy from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of energy from reaching fulfillment by development. In other words, this element, this factor of energy, if we don't constantly exert ourselves, think of exerting yourself, then your factor of energy weakens. So if you don't want that factor of energy to weaken, must constantly think of exerting yourself. Exerting yourself in the spiritual path. Exerting yourself, there are two aspects of it, two important aspects of the holy path. One is to study the Buddha's words, that is the theory part. And the second part is the practice of meditation, where we try to focus our mind, to get strength of mind. And then the third part is at other times, when we observe our mind, observe our body, feelings, the mind, and recall the Dhamma when you are not reading the book or sitting down in meditation. Try to recollect these four objects of sati. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of delight from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of delight from reaching fulfillment by development. There are monks, things that are the basis for the enlightenment factor of delight. Not frequently giving attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of delight from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of delight from reaching fulfillment by development. This enlightenment factor of delight, we mentioned earlier, refers to the delight that is attained from dwelling in the first jhana and the second jhana. So the things that are the basis for the factor of delight is, for example, to meditate frequently, sit down in meditation frequently. Secondly, like giving up a lot of worldly attachments, cut off worldly attachments so that you have more time to practice. And then another factor may be like becoming more aloof from society. Give up your going to the karaoke and to the race course and all that. So these things that are the basis for your attaining of the first and second jhana. If you frequently give attention to them, those things that support your attaining of the first jhana, then if you practice them, then this factor of delight increases. But if you don't pay attention to all these factors that support your attaining of the first and second jhana, then your factor of delight weakens. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of tranquility from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of tranquility from reaching fulfillment by development. There are monks, tranquility of body, tranquility of mind. Not frequently giving attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of tranquility from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of tranquility from reaching fulfillment by development. So, not frequently giving attention to tranquility of body and tranquility of mind, and the conditions that support tranquility of body and tranquility of mind. If you don't give attention to them, then this factor of tranquility weakens. And what monks is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of concentration from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of concentration from reaching fulfillment by development. There are monks, the sign of serenity, the sign of non-dispersal. Not frequently giving attention to them is the de-nourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of concentration from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of concentration from reaching fulfillment by development. So the sign of serenity and the sign of non-dispersal. Those things that give you serenity of mind, non-dispersal of mind, if you don't pay attention to them, then your factor of concentration weakens. For example, if you don't constantly keep your mind concentrated by chanting, instead you go and make your mind disperse by giving attention to sights, sounds, smells, tastes and touch and thoughts, then all your energy goes out to the six senses and your mind becomes scattered. That is the denourishment for the factor of concentration. And what mounts is the denourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of equanimity from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of equanimity from reaching fulfillment by development. There are amongst things that are the basis for the enlightenment factor of equanimity. Not frequently giving attention to them is the denourishment that prevents the unarisen enlightenment factor of equanimity from arising, and the arisen enlightenment factor of equanimity from reaching fulfillment by development. Things that are the basis for the factor of equanimity, things that support equanimity. If you don't give attention to them, don't cultivate the conditions that give rise to equanimity, then the equanimity factor will weaken. So that's the end of the sutta. So here is very clear. This sutta is a very important sutta. It tells you how to nourish this enlightenment factors and how to get rid of the five hindrances, and conversely, what are the things that weaken the enlightenment factors, and what are the things that strengthen the five hindrances. So if we understand these conditions, then we know how to practice to develop the seven factors of enlightenment and to weaken the hindrances. So I'll stop here because tonight we've gone over our question time discussion.
Can I ask such factors involving with the internal and external tendencies? What is the remedy by revulsion?
I did not say revulsion towards the internal and external sense basis. I was talking about revulsion of where was it? Oh, the one about the six sense bases. The six sense bases, the Buddha said that when the objects that impinge on our six sense bases, if they give us pleasant feelings, then we crave for them. And then when they give us unpleasant feelings, then we feel revulsion, we feel not happy with them. So our mind is moved by this like and dislike. If your mind is like an ordinary mind always has dislike and dislike, and very choosy, very choosy. We want the best things. Second, not so good things we don't want, and all these things. And that applies to everything, to the forms that we see, the sounds that we hear, the smells, the taste in food, touch, and even thoughts. So, if that is the case, then your mind is not steady like a rock. So it's easily moved by outside conditions. So the Buddha said in some other sutta, you're moved by the eight winds. You like praise, you don't like blame. You like to be famous and all these things. So if you are moved by these states, then you always experience sukha and dukkha. So if you don't want to experience dukkha, you must also not be moved by sukha. If your mind moves too much when you experience sukha, happiness, then when the happiness goes away, because everything in the world is impermanent, your happiness cannot last. So when your happiness goes away, then you will experience a lot of dukkha. But if you train your mind not to be moved by sukha so much, then when dukkha hits you, you also don't move so much. So how to train your mind to be not so easily moved is to cultivate strength of mind. And strength of mind comes from cultivating samadhi. When we have samadhi, we train the mind to focus. When the mind trains itself to focus, then it develops muscle power in the mind. Then when you put your attention to something, it becomes like a laser beam. You can focus there. So that is strength of mind. So that is the only way to not to be moved by external conditions. Not only that, also that's why we study the suttas. The suttas tell us the danger, for example, of sensual pleasure. The Buddha says sensual pleasure, you consider it like a pit, a hole deeper than a man's height, filled with charcoal. If you fall into that pit of charcoal, you are not able to climb out because it's higher than your height. And you get burned all the time and you're struggling to come out and you cannot come out. So when you see sensual pleasures, the Buddha says, you see it that way, then you become more careful. You don't simply indulge in it. When we are young, we don't know the dangers in the world. As they say, we are not streetwise. Okay? So a lot of young people, when something is nice, you straight go ahead and enjoy it without realizing the dangers. And then sometimes you can get caught in that, and you cannot get out of it. For example, some people who go into drugs, they are hooked to drugs, and their mind becomes so weak. They want to get out, but they just unable to help themselves because the mind is too weak. So there are also other things. Drugs is one extreme, but there are many other situations. For example, a lot of young people, when you're young, you think, it's very good to fall in love. Then after you fall in love, and then when you get your hands burned, your heart burned, then after that, next time somebody wants to fall in love with you, then you become very careful. The world is like that. When you are young, a lot of things we don't know. So the Dhamma is teaching us to lead our life in a skillful way, to differentiate between wholesome states and unwholesome states. States that give you happiness and states that give you suffering. There are a lot of states that give you happiness for a short while, and you think it's very good, but the end result is suffering. As they say, Thảo ti bôi kho, xin thìm hào phú. So these are the things in life a lot of people don't know. So when we learn the Dhamma, then the Dhamma teaches us. For example, if you didn't study the Dhamma, you didn't realize that life is so dangerous that when you pass away, a lot of people will go into the ghost realm. So a lot of people, when they don't study the Dhamma, they never realize that it is possible to be reborn as a ghost or an animal or fall into hell, is it? But the Dhamma tells us that it is very possible. In fact, most people after dying go into the ghost realm because we have used up our blessings, our store of blessings as a human being. And most people don't take the trouble to replenish your blessings by doing a lot of good deeds. So when they die, their store of blessings is less than when they came. That being the case, they will go into the ghost realm, even without doing evil deeds, without harming others. Just lead an ordinary life, you will go into the ghost realm. So these are the things that we never realize until you learn the Dhamma. Okay, shall we end for tonight?